Here to sort through all that noise is Dan Geltrude, America's accountant. Dan, could we possibly find ourselves with a contracting economy and high inflation? I mean, it seems like we might already do that.
Yeah, we definitely could, and boy, does that spell disaster, Scott. Yeah. I mean, you almost, when you think about it, you almost have to try to get us into a situation like this. And I think there's an argument to say that maybe they have been trying. You know, the economic powers in Washington, D.C., well, you know, I don't know where they got their economics degrees, but wherever their lines are crossing, they're getting it wrong all over the place. Look, we're going to see, in my mind, CPI and PPI, they're not going to drop. I think we can anticipate that those numbers are going to go up. Now, you could also say they're historical, right? So what does it mean going forward? Well, what I would tell you on those numbers is they don't retract so quickly, Scott. You could certainly have hyperinflation, but to bring all that back down, that is not easy. And that is why we're in a really big jam here, because if inflation is not going to retract, well, the Fed, because it politically has to do something, is going to take us down the path of higher rates. And higher rates are not the answer. They're just an alternative to perhaps a complete disaster, right? Because that's going to throw us into a recession if we're not already there. And there's a lot of consequences to that, Scott, a lot.
And that's why I want to see what this Michigan Consumer Sentiment has to say, because, you know, we're at 40-year lows when it comes to consumer confidence. We haven't gotten anything through that says anybody's happier. And as a matter of fact, everybody's pretty much worse off than they were, you know, this time last year or even the year before. And so that's a big problem. I'm starting to, believe it or not, this is going to sound really crazy, but some of the stuff I'm reading, and maybe you are too, is starting to say in the next 16, 18 months, we might have a deflation problem, not inflation. Could that be the case?
Well, wouldn't that be something? You know what, Scott? The way I see the direction we're going, it's almost like we're in uncharted territory. All the charts and all the analysis that's being done, it doesn't make a lot of sense to me. I don't know about how you're feeling with that. But for example, let's move over to the real estate market, for example. So when you have interest rates going up, prices are supposed to come down.
Right.
But they're not. We have interest rates going up and we have prices going up. Now, that's due to we just don't have enough inventory on the market. But it's a highly unusual situation. So what are people supposed to do? Just not buy a house? Well, what happens if they've already sold a house? Now
right.
what?
Right. Well, I tell you,
homeless?
So
it's a tough situation.
To your point about charts, right? I mean, we have a saying where my dad was in the business for a long time, and you may know that, but he said for forever and ever, I can remember what he'd say, you know, about charts. That every ship at the bottom of the ocean, Dan, had a chart room, right? So you'd have to keep that in mind and about those charts that don't make sense, because some of them really just don't. And so here we find ourselves in a situation where we've got a really, really strong dollar, but it's not because we're that great, right? It's because the rest of the world's having even bigger problems than the U.S. is. I mean, you saw all of the things over the weekend. I mean, where does that put us? I mean, how are we going to be competitive when people that don't have any money and already can't afford our products definitely can't afford them?
Well, we're in a situation where we have a decent house on a really crappy street, right? So now is that right. Any consolation, Scott? Right. You know, and the other thing I want to say too, let's stay on that topic of charts. And you could do all the analysis that you want, and I'm not saying it's not important, but to me, and I've always said this, a lot of the economy is driven by emotion and the way people feel. So that's why this consumer sentiment number that's coming out this week is so important, because when you have people not feeling good about the economy or their country or the future, what tends to happen is that they hold on, right? They're not out there spending money. So when that happens, you automatically have a retraction of the economy, which is exactly what we really don't want to have, in spite of the fact that's where the Fed is trying to take us.
Right.
So everything's out of whack, Scott.
So my last worry is this, and we only have about 100 seconds, is that we haven't really seen the job losses start to pile up. We still are waving the flag of 3.6% unemployment and beating our chest saying that's a really, really good thing. We've got the best economy of all time. But I think job losses, Dan, are right around the corner. We're already started to see some of them start, but I think that when they really get going here, it's going to be difficult to stop.
Well, those unemployment numbers, Scott, are deceiving. I've always said that. I mean, who are you really counting as unemployed, right? There's a lot more people that aren't working than 3.6%. And on top of that, we have 11 million job openings in this country. So again, we go to this economic dynamic that is so unusual. It's uncharted waters. I don't know if you've ever seen anything like this, but I can't recall these numbers aligning the way they are. So it makes it very hard for guys like you and I to actually predict what's going to happen next.
Right. I just want, just so everybody's clear, between Dan and I, we probably have almost 80 years of experience together, right? And if he and I have never seen this line up like it's lining up, that's something that's pretty significant, because usually these relationships and correlations kind of hold true, but not anymore. The worst thing you can have in this market is a memory, because nothing's doing what it used to do. And that's one of the biggest deals here. So I'll end on that one. It's important for the viewer out there. Don't be intimidated if you're confused, because 80 years of experience between the two of us also has us scratching our heads too. So I really appreciate coming on. That's a very honest thing to say, and I totally agree with you, Dan. Thank you very much for being on the show. All right.